snap. There's the kick. It's gone. Oh my gosh. The kick is gone.
Boston Sports Nerds present Joe's Fantasy Field Goal.
What's up, guys? We are back for another Fantasy Field Goal. As always, it is me, Joe, from the B.S.N Nerds, and I have 3 points to help you win your fantasy league. And we got a good show lined up. Obviously, some crazy news going on in the NFL that directly affects draft season and your fantasy team, keeper logic, all that kind of stuff is directly affected by the Zeke news and the big trades that went on over this last weekend here. So, we're just going to jump right to the news. That's going to be point 1 today. Point 2 is going to be some draft tips. And point 3 is going to be a mock draft. I took some feedback from the other 2 BS Nerds. That was good feedback that I should do the mock drafts first and then recap it afterward, which is what I did this time, instead of live drafting and trying to make those decisions as it's going on, and you guys like listening to me painfully through that whole thinking process where I forget to talk and stuff like that. So I already did the mock draft, and I'm going to recap it for you guys when we get to that point. And I thought it was important to mock draft this episode because of the Zeke news, because of the trades. You're seeing the ADP of Zeke and Sammy Watkins, Jordan Matthews. And Jordan Matthews had an injury too. What's affected, what it means for other receivers on those teams, what it means for other running backs like Darren McFadden. So that's why I thought it was important to bring back a mock draft, at least one more before, I think next weekend, or this weekend coming up actually, is when, like, from here until the start of the season is going to be like heavy draft. I know I have a draft coming up this weekend, and then I have I think I have a draft coming up this weekend, I have a draft next weekend, and then I have 3 or 4 the weekend after that. But it's going to be heavy draft season going on starting this weekend. But yeah, let's hop right into the news with point 1.
I said I'm with it if you with it. Point 'em out.
Alright, point 1 is the news, which is the first time I've ever made just the news a point. But the news this week is so monumental for fantasy purposes that I have to make it. Oh no, I had Jay Cutler news as a point last week, but this is even bigger news than that. Zeke was suspended. We all pretty much knew it was coming. I've hinted at it the past couple of fantasy field goals. Zeke's probably going to get suspended. I thought it was going to be a 3-game suspension at the most. It was a 6-game suspension. That's insane. He's going to appeal it. I don't know if that helps at all. I did a mock draft, so I'm not going to tell you what his ADP is at now. I'll tell you during the mock draft. But it plummeted. And it's puts you in a really hard to advocate drafting Zeke, because you could handle a 3-game suspension. We saw it with Lev Bell. You can handle any, especially a 2-game or 1-game. That happens all the time. A 6-game suspension, that's over a quarter of the season. I just don't know how you can justify drafting him. I guess if you can pair him with a later running back that you think you can get quality starts out of, like a Terrence West maybe, or a like Jaquiz Rogers, who is going to be the starting running back until Doug Martin is not suspended anymore. But that's only a couple games. Or obviously the obvious one is to pair him with Darren McFadden, whose stock is rising now, though. That's the only problem. Because everyone wants, well, not everyone, but, he obviously has value now because he's going to be the starting running back for the first 6 weeks. So it just puts you in a tough situation drafting Zeke and having to pair him with a later running back. I like the Terrence West pair because Terrence West is going really fucking late, later than he should be. He is the starting running back for the Ravens. You can grab Zeke where he's going now, which is what I'll tell you later, and then later on grab Terrence West, plug Terrence West in, and then you'll get a number 1 running back from week 6 on, or a top 3 running back from week 6 on. But those first 6 weeks, I mean, the fantasy season is usually only 14 weeks, the regular season. So he's almost suspended for half of the fantasy regular season. And I know he's going to appeal, but I don't know, not every appeal lasts all year like Tom Brady's did that first year. Some appeals, Lane Johnson appealed, and then he had to just serve his 10 games later on in the season with a later start date. So if Zeke appeals, if they don't actually knock it down, yeah, you might get Zeke at the start of the season. What if you get Zeke for the first 6 games? What if you get Zeke for the first 8 games, right? Then he's suspended the last 6, the next 6. That's the rest of the fantasy regular season. And if Zeke announces his appeal now, and his appeal, like they accept it and they say, hey, you can start before the start of the regular season, his ADP goes up a little probably from where it is now, but that's still a huge risk taking Zeke because you could lose him for 6 weeks at any point now. And now you're out of running back. Because now you lost Zeke for 6 weeks. You didn't plan on this happening. You didn't draft a plug-and-play guy. Maybe at this point you might have picked someone up off of waivers. You can plug in at this point. Or he could leave your team to shit. He's just a really risky pick now with all this stuff that's going on. And I'll tell you where he's fallen to. Some people might not be able to pass up on him. Obviously I did a mock draft, and a little hint, I didn't draft Zeke. I actually didn't see where he fell to till after, but I don't know if I would have drafted him then anyway. It's just a really risky pick in a redraft. Obviously, if you're in a keeper league, he's got to be your keeper unless you do like a value-based thing. Maybe it's not worth using your number 1 pick on a guy you can't play for 6 weeks. But if you plan on keeping him any longer than what you have now, you're playing, as long as you're playing for 2018, he's definitely worth being your keeper. But you'd have to, punt this year or try and piece this year together the best you can, knowing you lost this guy, or you pick up Darren McFadden in your draft, because I doubt he's being kept. So Dynasty, I mean, someone might have Darren McFadden. If you're the Zeke owner, you probably should have tried to make that trade or picked him up when the rumors that Zeke might be suspended first came out. That's on you for being a dynasty owner. Zeke wasn't the only big news, though. The Buffalo Bills just decided the Patriots are too good to even attempt to be good this year, so they traded away their best wide receiver and their best corner. But we're going to focus on the wide receiver for fantasy purposes. Sammy Watkins traded to the Rams, and then they made a trade with the Eagles and got Jordan Matthews. So pretty much they swapped, for the Bills' purposes, or the Bills, just focusing on the Bills, they swapped Sammy Watkins for Jordan Matthews. And then Jordan Matthews got hurt his first practice with the Bills. Pretty significant injury. He's going to probably miss a couple games at the start of the year, and then it's pain tolerance, and I don't know, it's a chip bone, so it could be a wide recovery window with a chip bone. But let's talk about Sammy Watkins' fantasy value. Sammy Watkins, I thought, had the upside in the Bills' offense as the only guy there, pretty much, to be a stud this year, purely at his ceiling. His ceiling is an absolute stud, could be a top 5 receiver. I just don't see it in, little known fact, the Bills had a top 12 off. It might have been a top 10 actually. Bills had a top 10 offense last year without Sammy Watkins. You wouldn't have thought that, but it's true. The Rams did not have a top 10 offense. So the Rams had a really bad offense. I don't think it's even that much better if you add Sammy Watkins. And I don't trust the quarterback in LA like I do Tyrod Taylor, who I think is actually a pretty good quarterback, especially for fantasy purposes. I think Jordan Matthews could be good on that team. I don't know if his value is that much higher than it would have been on the Eagles. He would be the number one. I actually really like Anquan Bolden. I think he kind of made out from this whole Bills thing, and if Zay Jones can stay healthy, he might be a quality receiver, fantasy relevant receiver as a rookie. But I think Anquan Bolden has the potential to catch a lot of touchdowns there. I think it helps Charles Clay a lot with Sammy Watkins gone, especially if there's injuries anywhere else. We saw Tyrod Taylor lean on Charles Clay last year when he was down a lot of weapons. He'll be down a lot of weapons again. Might have to lean on Charles Clay again. Charles Clay's also got some injuries going on, so we'll see if his legs can hold up. Then I think Charles Clay is going to be valuable. So it does make some other people valuable, but I think Sammy Watkins has to go down. He definitely lost some luster, some draft value. His ADP has gone down a little because of this move. Also, I think this helps in Philly, where they lost Jordan Matthews, they gained Ronald Darby in the Bills swap it's pretty much a 3-team trade. The Rams got Sammy Watkins. The Rams traded the Bills a corner and a second round pick, and then the Bills traded Ronald Darby to the Eagles and got Jordan Matthews. I think for the Eagles, it makes Zach Ertz more valuable because Jordan Matthews was the slot guy. He took over the middle of the field a lot, and I think that'll leave it open for Zach Ertz, who came on at the end of the season and was really, he finished the season as I think the number 1 tight end over the last 4 or 6 games, but he just didn't have the sample size to make him a highly drafted guy, so he's still going pretty late in drafts, and if he can repeat how he looked the last 6 games when he was healthy over the course of an entire season next year, then he is a guy who you can get for a very low draft cost who has the potential to be a top 3 tight end in the NFL this year. but he's risky, obviously. He's a little bit injury prone, but so are the other top tight ends. Tight ends are a shit show. There are a lot of guys who could be good. It looks to the naked eye that there is a lot of quality talent at tight end. But I just think there's a lot of question marks with these guys. Like Hunter Henry, great tight end. Can he repeat the touchdown efficiency that he had last year, where he was pretty much purely catching touchdown passes? Like Cameron Brate was the same way, and I think his value's plummeted now with O.J. Howard there. What's O.J. Howard gonna be like? What about Jack Doyle? That was another touchdown. It was just another efficiency guy. He did a lot with a little. What's he gonna look like this year, especially with Andrew Luck's health and how good that offensive line, or how not good that offensive line is? What about, Kyle Rudolph? Does he repeat what he did last year? I know he's got Sammy Sleeves there, who likes to target the tight end, but that offense as a whole is not very impressive. So, is the red zone reindeer gonna find the red zone all that much? There's like two. It's like, if Gronk is healthy, he's a no-brainer. He's definitely going to be the number 1 tight end or number 2 tight end at the worst. If Jordan Reed is healthy, it's a no-brainer. He's definitely going to be the number 1 or number 2 tight end. But they're risky. Why? Because they're always hurt. It's just kind of a crapshoot. Tyler Eifert, another guy, has the potential to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 tight end, but he's always hurt. Travis Kelce, pretty consistently a good tight end, but he never scores touchdowns. He was the number 1 tight end last year, but compared to a good Gronk season, his season was awful. So, and now you're paying a premium price for Travis Kelce because he was the number 1 tight end last year. So it's just, I would rather wait on tight end because it's such a crapshoot, and then just try and take a guess at who could end up in that top 10. And you'll probably switch halfway through the year, or, game to game, play matchups when you can. But just trying to pick a tight end early in the draft and ride them out, I just don't know how viable it's going to be this year. I don't know how we got started on tight ends. I'm supposed to be talking about the news. But we talked about Zeke. We talked about Sammy Watkins. We talked a little bit about Jordan Matthews. He's hurt. I do think he'll be okay in the Bills. I think he has higher ceiling, and I think his floor is relatively safe as to where it is now already. So to me, Jordan Matthews gets a slight bump, very slight bump. Sammy Watkins is definitely a downgrade. I would give a bump to Anquan Bolden because I think his touchdowns are going to go up. I would give a bump to Charles Clay. I would give a slight bump to Zay Jones. I might give an even bigger bump to LaShawn McCoy because I think there's a chance LaShawn McCoy leads that team in receptions. Would it be shocking if LaShawn McCoy had 70 receptions, 80 receptions next year? I don't think it would be. We've seen a running back do it pretty much. Last year, David Johnson had, I think, 80 receptions. So it's not insane. Sammy Watkins gets a downgrade. Other news was Ryan Matthews was cut today, I believe. I should probably double check that. Ryan Matthews was cut today, so that, not shocking at all. LeGarrette Blount's the starter there. You have Wendell Smallwood. I don't know how fantasy relevant he'll be. I'm sure he'll take a couple touches. You have Darren Sproles, who still has a part in that offense. And you have the guy I talked about.
on my rookie report.
And you have Donnell Pumphrey, who I'm curious to see how he's being used in that offense as a more explosive Darren Sproles, maybe. But yeah, Ryan Matthews, that's the only other piece of news. I don't think that changes anyone's value. Everyone was expecting him to be a cut. I don't think it's really a surprise cut. So we are going to move on to point 2, draft tips.
Point time. Going for 2.
All right, point 2, draft tips. The 3 draft tips I have today are to let the draft come to you, to draft with tiers, which I'll explain that, and to try and end your draft with an equal number of running backs and wide receivers. So we'll start with tip 1, which is to let the draft come to you. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Don't reach. It's okay to reach if you're at the turns, because there's a chance, well, obviously there's not a chance, but guys in the middle or, the next round, you have to wait a long ass time before it gets back to your pick. So just take the guy you want, as long as you're not reaching 3 rounds away. You know what I mean? You're still getting the value, but you're getting the exact guy you want. So don't worry about exact value, like he goes at the 210. Well, obviously, if you have the 2-1 and that's the guy you want, he's not going to be there when it gets back to you at the 310. So you got to take him at the 2. Well, technically you would get the 210 if you drafted first in a 10-man league. First pick. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. When you're picking at the edges, at the turns, take the guys based on their round value, not based on round and pick. You know what I mean? It's okay to reach at the turns. But other than that, let the draft come to you. And I guess this point kind of falls into the setup tiers, draft by tiers system that I like. When you're doing your own player rankings, or if you're using someone else's player rankings, see if they have a tier-based player ranking system. If they don't, set up your own tiers. So I would say, previous to the Zeke news, that there were 3 running backs that are tier 1 running backs in the NFL. That's David Johnson, Lev Bell, and Zeke. Now with the Zeke news, there's probably only 2. Actually, I think there still might be 3. There's 3 running backs that are tier 1 guys in the NFL. And that's David Johnson, no, it's only 2. I was going to try and force LaShawn McCoy into that first tier, but David Johnson and Lev Bell are in a tier on their own. So, in that first tier is David Johnson and Lev Bell. Then tier 2 would be LaShawn McCoy, Devonta Freeman, DeMarco Murray, let's say. And maybe Melvin Gordon. He's right on the cuff of that second tier. This is just my tier. I mean, this is just off the top of my head how I would tier them. But that's really kind of irrelevant. I'm telling you to go through your rankings. If the rankings you use don't offer a tiered system, or if you don't agree with what their tiers are, go through your rankings and make your own tiers before your draft. And then when you're drafting, as you're crossing players off, if you see there's a tier 2 wide receiver still available on your rankings, but the best running backs left are all tier 4. The best or obviously you might have, it's probably still good tight ends and quarterbacks there, but pretty much running backs and wide receivers, if there's a tier 2 wide receiver there and you're drafting tier 4 running backs down here, you're going to take that tier 2 wide receiver because you're letting the draft come to you. This guy is still there. Don't pass on a tier 2 wide receiver to take a tier 4 running back when you think this guy is going to have that much better of a season. Obviously, you ranked him as a tier 2 receiver for a reason. And it just makes drafting easier. It makes the values easier to spot when a guy is really falling down the draft board for no reason other than, people just overreaching for guys they like. So I like the tier-based drafting system because it helps you let the draft come to you. So both of those points should really be 1 point. You want to let the draft come to you, and the best way to do that is to tier your guys your own way, and then draft based on those tiers. And the third point is to try and end up with equal running backs to wide receivers. Now, this is tough to do if you're just going by what the draft gives you. But if you're going through, you should just try and be conscious of how many running backs you have on your roster. You don't want to have way more running backs than you have wide receivers, and you don't want to have way more wide receivers than you have running backs. You want to try and keep an equal split. Obviously, it's okay if you have, one more wide receiver than you do running backs, or one more running back than you do wide receiver. I would prefer to have one more running back than I do wide receiver, just because this is just the team you drafted. Obviously, you're going to make roster moves, and it's much easier to find a waiver wire wide receiver than it is to find a waiver wire running back that's going to directly affect your team. So you're just adding more chances to hit on a running back if you happen to have at least the same amount, if not one more running back than wide receiver. Do you see what I'm saying? You want to have, just because finding waiver wire wide receivers it's pretty common throughout the season. Because it's that common, it's better to stock up on running backs in the draft, because running backs are harder to find, so you want to have as many options as possible. Even if they might not be the greatest options, you still have them on your roster already if your running back position goes completely south. So that's why you should keep just as many. You should try and keep an equal wide receiver running back ratio when you're drafting. That's why you should try and keep an equal running back wide receiver ratio. And we're going to move on to the mock draft recap right now.
Puts up the three. Bang!
All right, point 3 is the mock draft recap. So I did a mock draft before I started the podcast, and for the mock draft in Draft Wizard, draftwizard.fantasypros.com, what I've been using for all these mock drafts I've been doing. You can, if you become a member, which I have, it costs a little money, but I paid it for you guys. If you pay a little money, become a member, you can actually import your leagues into the Draft Wizard, and then you can mock draft you can run your mock draft with your league setup and rules in place, and it'll actually even import the team names, as I can tell right here. So I did a mock draft based on my main league, the one I notoriously finished in last in. I did a mock draft. Now, that's a keeper league, and you have to pay a little more to be able to plug in keepers and then mock draft that way. So this is not with the keepers plugged in. So like, I pick Antonio Brown in the first round. Antonio Brown's not on my team in this real league. He's not my keeper. But I just did a mock draft with our rules. We're in a half-point PPR, 10-man league. 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, kicker, defense, tight end.
and a 7-man bench. So this is a 2-quarterback. I don't know if I've done a 2-quarterback mock draft yet. This is a 2-quarterback mock draft. So I'm going to read you the results. I picked 4th. So obviously David Johnson went first. Now try and pay attention to where Zeke goes when I read this. So David Johnson goes first. Lev Bell goes second. Aaron Rodgers goes third. Now this is a 2-quarterback league. So don't be surprised. Quarterbacks are going to go high. They're going to go often in a 2-quarterback league. I still waited on quarterback. As late as I could. I stocked up on a bunch of other position players. And I think I ended up with one of my favorite teams I've drafted since I've done the mock drafts with you guys. So I'm happy about this. But David Johnson goes first. Lev Bell goes second. Aaron Rodgers goes third. I take Antonio Brown with the 4th pick. Antonio Brown's like the safest receiver in the world. He's got the highest floor ever. And obviously, he's been a number 1 wide receiver before, so it doesn't get like a much better ceiling than that. LaShawn McCoy goes 5th after I take Antonio Brown. Then Julio Jones, 6th. 7th is Drew Brees. 8th is Odell Beckham. Drew Brees goes 2nd. This is kind of crazy. You'll notice in a little bit where Tom Brady goes. I just realized this is kind of insane. So Drew Brees goes 2nd. Odell Beckham, second for quarterbacks. He goes 7th in the draft. Then Odell Beckham goes 8th. Mike Evans goes 9th. And Melvin Gordon goes 10th. Then on the turn, so he drafted, number 10 drafted Melvin Gordon, turns around and drafts, I was reading this backwards. Turns around and drafts Tom Brady. Now it makes sense. I was reading it constantly left to right instead of doing the turn and going back right to left. So I thought Tom Brady actually went 5th quarterback off the board. He's the 3rd. That makes a lot more sense. So he takes Melvin Gordon on the turn, takes Tom Brady. Then Devonta Freeman goes with the 12th pick. AJ Green goes with the 13th. Jordy Nelson goes with the 14th. Andrew Luck 15th. Michael Thomas 16th pick. So that's the 6th pick of the 2nd round. And then I have the 7th pick of the 2nd round. I take DeMarco Murray. So I have Antonio Brown, DeMarco Murray. 8th pick of the 2nd round. Russell Wilson. 9th pick, 2nd round. Jordan Howard. 10th pick, 2nd round, Jay Ajayi. On the turn, on 1st pick of the 3rd round, Matt Ryan. 2nd pick of the 3rd round, T.Y. Hilton. 4th pick of the 3rd round, or 3rd pick of the 3rd round, Amari Cooper. I take Todd Gurley with the 4th pick. Rob Gronkowski goes 5th of the 3rd. Isaiah Crowell goes 6th. Jameis Winston goes 7th. Dez Bryant goes 8th. Ben Roethlisberger goes 9th. Leonard Fournette goes at the last pick of the 3rd round. And I'm not going to read every pick. So I take Brandon Cooks in the next round, round 4. Some noteworthy people. Lamar Miller goes 2 picks before me. Lamar Miller goes 3 picks before me. Dalvin Cook goes 2 picks before me. Allen Robinson went a pick before Brandon Cooks. So think about that. 2 more quarterbacks come off the board in this round. 3 more quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota, Kirk Cousins, and Derek Carr. I take Alshon Jeffrey in the 5th round. A pick after Ezekiel Elliott. So Ezekiel Elliott went with the 4th, 4th. He went with the 3rd pick of the 5th round. So at the 5-3 goes Ezekiel Elliott. That's how far he's fallen. You can get Ezekiel Elliott in the 5th round. So I think the better way to do this would be to just read you my team. So I got Antonio Brown 1st pick, DeMarco Murray 2nd, Todd Gurley 3rd, Brandon Cooks 4th, Alshon Jeffrey 5th, Christian McCaffrey 6th. So I have 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, no quarterback yet. I take Golden Tate in the 7th round, and I take my first quarterback in the 8th round as Matt Stafford. After I take Matt Stafford, I take Mike Gillislee in the 9th round, and then in the 10th and 11th round, I take Carson Wentz and Blake Bortles back to back. Now, I did that because quarterback's starting to get real thin. After Blake Bortles, the only other people that go off the board are guys like Sam Bradford, Alex Smith, Trevor Siemian, Deshaun Watson, Brian Hoyer, Jay Cutler. Some of these guys aren't even guaranteed jobs. Colin Kaepernick got picked in the 16th round. That's insane. He's not even on a team. But, so I took Matt Stafford round 8, Gillislee in between, and then at round 9, and then 10th and 11th, I go back-to-back quarterbacks. If you're in a 2-quarterback league and you're going to wait on quarterback, the only rule I like to play in that scenario, a 2-quarterback league and you're waiting on quarterback, is I like to try and get 3 decent quarterbacks as opposed to, so like if I'm taking Aaron Rodgers the first pick, in the first round, like the guy who took Aaron Rodgers took Russell Wilson the very next pick. He went Aaron Rodgers round 1, Russell Wilson round 2. He doesn't end up, and his last pick is Colin Kaepernick, so it's quarterback with no team. That I'm okay with that actually, because you got 2 studs at quarterback your first 2 picks. I'm not okay with taking 2 studs at quarterback for your first 2 picks because I like late value quarterbacks. But if you're gonna do that, you should save your 3rd quarterback. Should not be another high pick. It should be a late quarterback. If you're gonna wait to draft your first quarterback, then try and draft 3 decent ones. That way you can play the matchups and be okay with any of the 3 starting. So as opposed to 2 really good ones high in the draft, or even like 1 good one and then 2 decent ones later in the draft, go 3 decent quarterbacks later in the draft. I have Matt Stafford as my first quarterback. I really like Matt Stafford. He's like a guarantee 4,200 yards and 20 plus touchdowns, which is a pretty high floor for a quarterback. Carson Wentz and Blake Bortles are, what am I going to get with them? You don't really know. But between the 2 of them, I could probably get a decent second week, which is what my idea was. After I take Carson Wentz and Blake Bortles, round 12 I take Doug Martin. Now I already have DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey, Mike Gillislee. So I can take Doug Martin in the 12th round, a super late value. In the 12th round, I take Doug Martin. And Doug Martin has running back 1 potential. And I have plenty of guys to play while he's suspended between, Murray and Gurley, McCaffrey, Gillislee. I'll have plenty of good weeks. So I'm not worried about it. So I take Doug Martin because the risk is minimized at this point, and he's fallen. Doug Martin is getting drafted after Rob Kelly and before James White. Like right before James White. The next running backs that go off the board are Thomas Rawls, Duke Johnson, CJ. You're down to the nitty gritty at this point, and I can snag a guy who could potentially be a number 1 running back that late. I'm completely for it. So after I take Doug Martin in round 12, I take Cam Meredith in round 13. I know Cam Meredith, not a big name. He's the number 1 receiver for the Bears. I don't care what anyone says about Kev White or any of those other guys. Cam Meredith is your number 1 receiver. Then I take Kenny Britt in the 14th. Again, he's your number 1 receiver for the Cleveland Browns. I know Corey Coleman's there, and when Corey Coleman's healthy, maybe he's the number 1. But that's when Corey Coleman's healthy, and I've seen Kenny Britt do it in this league before on a bad team. He did it last year. He had over 1,000 yards, one of the worst offenses in the NFL. I think his offense is actually better with Cleveland than it was in LA last year. So I would not be surprised if Kenny Britt has another 1,000-yard season. After I take Kenny Britt in round 14, round 15, I take Julius Thomas just because I didn't really like any of the other tight ends on the board, and I was afraid of having to draft like C.J. Fedorowicz, who I don't think is going to be any good this year. So I didn't want Julius Thomas to go off the board before I could take him. So I save tight end for like right before kickers and defense, but I a little earlier I take Julius Thomas in round 15. In round 16 I take Tyrell Williams. Now listen, Tyrell Williams was like the number 14 receiver last year. I got him in the third to last round of this draft. I take Tyrell Williams, then I take a defense and a kicker. Like, that's how it went. Tyrell Williams, defense, kicker. Tyrell Williams was a top 15 wide receiver last year. The only thing that's changed is that Keenan Allen is there and Mike Williams is there. Mike Williams isn't there right now because his back is hurt. So Tyrell Williams is there. He is the number one guy after Keenan Allen. And if he can repeat even a little bit of what he did last year, then I got like a number 2 receiver in the 16th round. And if he can't, then all I did was take a shot. You know what I mean? There's literally no risk at Tyrell Williams in the 16th round. I mean, other people going are like Rex Burkhead, Jaquiz Rogers, Jared Goff, Jamal Charles, Joe Williams, Deion Lewis. Tyrell Williams in the 16th round is like the lowest risk, highest upside pick that I could make right there. And if it turns out I get a number 14 receiver again, I'm going to be ecstatic. Then I take the Pats defense and Sebastian Janikowski. I guess they don't really matter. So just to go over the team again, Antonio Brown, DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, Brandon Cooks, Alshon Jeffrey, Christian McCaffrey, Golden Tate, Matt Stafford, Mike Gillislee, Carson Wentz, Blake Bortles, Doug Martin, Cam Meredith, Kenny Britt, Julius Thomas, Tyrell Williams, defense kicker. I really like this team, actually, that I drafted. I think DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, 2 safe picks for running backs. And I kind of padded my running backs with guys who, if either one of them really fail, guys who could have become number ones, like Mike Gillislee and Doug Martin and Christian McCaffrey. Guys who, if they have an expanded role in the offense, have high number 1 potential. Just in case DeMarco Murray and Todd Gurley fail and for any reason. I have the best wide receiver that you can have pretty much in Antonio Brown, and I have a guy with insane upside in Brandon Cooks, another guy who is also kind of risky in Alshon Jeffrey, but could have good upside, or really good upside if the offense in Philly really starts to click. I took a nice safe pick with Golden Tate. He's the PPR guy there in Detroit. He's going to get his receptions. It's going to happen, which is fine with me to take in a half-point PPR league along with Antonio Brown and to put behind 2 guys like Brandon Cooks and Alshon Jeffrey in case, So this is a 2-flex league. So, I mean, if I want to, Antonio Brown and Golden Tate start every week as my wide receivers, and then I play matchups with Brandon Cooks and Alshon Jeffrey, and I can, put the guy who I think has the better chance to go off, or both of them, in both my flex spots. You know what I mean? I just really like the team I drafted. I also got Cameron Meredith and Kenny Britt, guys, sneaky, and Tyrell Williams. So my wide receiving core, I really like. My running back core, I'm ecstatic with. I guess quarterback's my weakest spot, but like I said, I always like to draft late quarterbacks. I'm perfectly fine with Matt Stafford being my starting number 1 quarterback, and I think I can get a solid week 2 out of, or a solid quarterback 2 number out of a combination of Carson Wentz and Blake Bortles. So I'm ecstatic about this team. I like it a lot. I'll read some other teams to you here. Anyone interesting I see. The guy who had first pick, he got David Johnson, Jay Ajayi back to back. Then went Matt Ryan, Derek Carr, 3 and 4. So stud running backs, stud quarterbacks, but his best receiver is Terrell Pryor, who I actually really like this year. In round 5, it's actually a pretty decent value, or I like Terrell Pryor as the first pick for his wide receiving core, and Jarvis Landry. That's a good pair. He's got Jeremy Maclin later. He took 2 tight ends, which I don't think you should ever do. Even in a 2 flex league, that's just dumb. His wide receiving core is not great. It seems serviceable. And his running back depth isn't the best either. Let's see. Second team, guy who picked second, went Le'Veon Bell, Jordan Howard first 2 picks. And then T.Y. Hilton, DeAndre Hopkins, the next 2 picks, which is T.Y. Hilton I really like. DeAndre Hopkins is a risky pick to me just because I don't know what you're going to get with DeAndre Hopkins this year. I don't think you're ever going to see DeAndre Hopkins from a couple years ago. He just had all the targets then, and I just don't know if he'll have that much target share ever again. With the new quarterback and all that stuff. So he's just a risky pick there. He could be a number 1 receiver, but I don't know. Then he takes Cam Newton as his first quarterback. My feelings on Cam Newton are pretty well documented. He took Sammy Watkins, Sammy Watkins went in the 6th round. I think I was taking him in the 3rd round in one of my previous mock drafts, so he's down 3 rounds from that LA trade. And I would feel better for him having Sammy Watkins to pair with DeAndre Hopkins to see if one of them pops, if Sammy Watkins was still in Buffalo, but he's not. He takes Jimmy Graham in the 7th, C.J. Anderson, Andy Dalton that late in round 9. That's a good pick. I don't see, to me, Andy Dalton's the number 1 quarterback on this team, even though he took Cam Newton 4 rounds before. So he went back-to-back quarterback, kind of like I did a little later in the draft. He went Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Jackson, Rob Kelly, Coby Fleener, Corey Davis. He took Seattle's defense in the 15th round as opposed to the 17th round when all the other defenses went. So that was dumb. But yeah, that's my team, guys. That's the fantasy draft I did, or the mock draft. Zeke Elliott going 3rd pick of the 5th round. That's where I think you're going to start seeing him. 4th, 5th round is where I think his ADP is going to fall to. Right around there. And I still think he's risky. If I would have gone, I picked Christian McCaffrey in the 6th round. I already had DeMarco Murray and Todd Gurley on my team at the time. If Zeke would have fallen to the 6th round, my pick on the 6th round, I would have taken Zeke probably. With 2 running backs like that already on the roster, I already have Antonio Brown, I already have Brandon Cooks and Alshon Jeffrey. I can take the hit on Zeke in the 6th. With his 6-game suspension, ride it out with Murray and Gurley until he's back, and now I have DeMarco Murray and Zeke Elliott, Todd Gurley in the flex if I want, and I could still pick up guys like Gillislee. I don't know if I would have made the Doug Martin pick then. If I had taken Zeke Elliott and have 2 guys on suspension is kind of just handicapping your team, really, but if Zeke would have made it to the 6th round, I would have taken him. but he went 5-3. So, just to recap the team one more time, Matt Stafford and Carson Wentz are my 2 starting quarterbacks. DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, 2 starting running backs. Antonio Brown, Brandon Cooks are the 2 starting wide receivers. Julius Thomas at tight end. In the first flex, I got Alshon Jeffrey. The second flex, I got Christian McCaffrey. New England's defense, Sebastian Janikowski. Then the bench, I got Golden Tate, Mike Gillislee, Blake Bortles, Doug Martin, Cam Meredith, Kenny Britt, and Tyrell Williams. I really like this team, guys. I think this team would do great. They gave me an A- rating. The ratings never fucking matter, but that was the rating they gave me. But anyway, that's it for the fantasy field goal. Another one that I got under an hour, which is great. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Email me, joesfantasyfg@gmail.com. Obviously, there's no apostrophe in the Joes. I'll post the link. I just found out you can post a link for the play draft for the BS Nerds fantasy, the best ball league I'm going to put on. So I'm going to post the link on the BS Nerds page. Click the link and then sign up for play draft. It is a free app. It will be a free league, and you can win a BS Nerds hat if you come in first place. And listen to the BS Nerds, rate, review, subscribe, all that nonsense. You guys have a nice Tuesday night. Have a nice rest of the week. I'm out.